I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The coffee shop smelled like burnt sugar and steamed milk, the kind of place where the light bends across the table in thin, horizontal strips. I was half asleep, scrolling through my phone, tapping the screen without looking. A few tables over, she appeared, moving like she belonged to some quiet rhythm I couldn't name. My friend had warned me about her once, years ago. She's complicated. I had nodded, unsure what that meant at 20. Now, I was starting to understand without words. She ordered the same thing she always did. A black coffee, no sugar, slightly lukewarm. The barista handed it over, and she smiled at him with that faint, knowing tilt of her head, like she had time to notice everything and nothing at all. She didn't look at me right away, and I almost relaxed, pretending not to notice that my stomach tightened when she finally did. "Hey," she said. Quiet. Casual, but it made the hair on my arms prick in a way I hadn't felt before. I said my name. She repeated it softly, testing the syllables. "Right," she said. I remember. It wasn't flattery. Not really. It was recognition, like she'd filed me away somewhere between errands, and remembered. We found a table across from each other, not too close. Her bag rested on the chair next to her. Her hand brushed the strap absent-mindedly. I kept noticing the small things. The way her ring caught the light. The way she folded her napkin with a precise tension. The way her eyes flicked toward my hands and lingered just long enough to make me self-conscious. I got your text," I said finally, fumbling with my phone. My thumb hovered over a half-written reply I never sent. She tilted her head. "Late, huh?" I shrugged. "Work. Alive but small and quiet." She didn't press. That was the thing. Her silence was heavier than words, in the way a room goes quiet before rain. We talked. Not about much. About the coffee, about the weather, about something my friend had said at a party I barely remembered. I laughed at a joke she didn't even intend as one, and she smiled in that particular way. A curve at the corner of her lips, a softness that made me want to lean in a little closer, and then stop myself. There was something in her gaze that made everything ordinary feel like it had weight. Like a Sunday afternoon stretched longer than it should. Like I could notice the little things, the ones nobody else sees. The slight tremor when she stirred her coffee. The way her fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the table. The way she'd glance out the window and then catch my glance and quickly look away. I realized halfway through that I had been holding my coffee without drinking it. I set it down, staring at the swirling steam. My thoughts had paused, circling around the edges of something I couldn't name. She stood to leave, sliding her bag onto her shoulder. "I should get going," she said. Her voice was even, but her eyes lingered, longer than necessary. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't, so I just watched. She passed by, and my hand twitched toward hers before I stopped myself. Outside, the night smelled faintly of rain, the street lamps casting pale pools on the pavement. My phone buzzed. A message. I didn't recognize the number. "Can you come by? Just for a little while." I blinked. Read again. My coffee had gone cold, but my chest felt warm in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't even know if I should. And yet, somehow, I wanted to. The next evening, I found myself at her door, a little too early, my shoes scuffing against the concrete as I hesitated. She opened it, casual as ever, hair pulled back, wearing an old sweater that smelled faintly of vanilla and soap. "Hey," she said. "No surprise, no judgment. Just recognition." "Hey," I muttered, shifting from one foot to the other. I wasn't sure why I'd come exactly. Curiosity. Something heavier. She motioned me in, and we sat at her small kitchen table, tea steaming between us. The quiet filled the room, the kind that makes you notice the way someone else arranges their things. The spoon slightly askew in her cup, a stack of books with a bookmark sticking out, the way her hands hovered over the mug before picking it up. I used to live here alone," she said softly, almost as if she were trying it out on herself. Before the divorce." She didn't elaborate. She never did. I didn't ask, but I felt her eyes flick to mine, maybe seeing if I understood. I nodded. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I picked up my own mug, warm between my hands, and thought about all the times I'd watched her from distance. Imagined scenarios where we weren't standing here, but somewhere else. Dangerous, reckless scenarios I quickly shoved down. "You've changed a lot since high school," she said, voice casual, but not casual enough. There was weight in it, the kind that sits quietly in your chest. "Yeah, I guess." I kept my eyes on the tea, swirling it absent-mindedly. "Life moves fast, I suppose." She smiled faintly, a corner of her lips, and I felt my chest tighten. There was familiarity, but also the reminder that some things shouldn't be this familiar. The age gap, the unspoken warnings, the quiet knowledge that this was her friend's kid once. We fell into silence after that. I watched her hands, the way she folded the napkin, then unfolded it. The way she sipped her tea slowly, as if tasting more than the liquid itself. My thoughts looped around her presence. The warmth, the softness, the way it was entirely too easy to imagine more than just conversation. "Can you reach that for me?" she asked suddenly, pointing to a spice jar just out of reach. I leaned across the table, our fingers brushing. Just for a second, but long enough for my pulse to spike. She didn't pull away. She let the contact linger, as if acknowledging something neither of us would say out loud. I caught her gaze and held it, hesitant, like testing a current. She didn't smile or look away immediately, just let it rest there quietly. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't plan to see her again so soon. But life, or maybe something else, pushed me there. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She was in the living room, bent over a stack of papers, hair loose, catching the light in strands of copper. I froze at the doorway, unsure if I should step in or turn around. "Hey," I said finally. My voice sounded small. She straightened up quickly, brushing her hair back, eyes flicking toward mine, then away. That hesitation, just a pause, made my chest tighten. "Hey," she replied. Not warm, not cold, just measured. I moved closer, but not too close. Close enough to see the slight furrow at her brow, the way she tugged at the hem of her sleeve. Something in me wanted to reach out. Something in her made me pause. "Everything okay?" I asked. A question, not an offer. She looked at me, long enough that I felt exposed. "Yeah, just paperwork." Her fingers drummed a quiet rhythm on the table. I nodded. Saturday. The air between us stretched thin, taut. My thumb brushed the edge of my coffee mug. She noticed. She didn't say anything, just watched. There was a knock at the door. A friend. My friend. Actually, her son's old friend from high school. Came in laughing about something trivial, oblivious to the quiet storm in the room. "Oh, hi," she said, forcing a smile, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I shifted, suddenly aware of the age gap, the unspoken rules, the warning signs flashing red in my mind. The friend stayed for a few minutes, making jokes I barely heard. I watched her respond with polite laughter, the corners of her lips twitching, but her eyes, always her eyes, flicked to mine a second too long, a whisper of something she couldn't or wouldn't say. When the door finally clicked shut, silence crashed back in. My hand hovered over hers, the table between us suddenly a canyon. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. She leaned forward to gather some papers, and I found myself leaning just a little too. Our knees brushed. That tiny contact made my pulse spike. She didn't pull away. She barely even flinched. I opened my mouth. She looked up, eyes wide. Something unspoken. Something dangerous. I swallowed. My tongue felt thick. My chest felt heavy. Her gaze dropped, just slightly, and she cleared her throat. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to close the gap, to let the rest of the world fall away. But I didn't. And maybe that hesitation was the sharpest moment of all. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to leave. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about rules or age or friends noticing. I wanted to, but I just sat there. And for a heartbeat, maybe two, maybe more, I thought she might lean in. I thought we might, but she didn't. She just looked at me long and quietly, and I realized that nothing had been said, and yet everything had been. It was late evening when I found her sitting on the park bench, the sky the color of bruised peach. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and the leftover smoke from a distant barbecue. I hadn't planned to see her again, but my legs moved before my brain caught up. She didn't look up when I approached. Her hands folded over her lap, fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. The street lamps painted long, thin shadows across her face, and I realized, abruptly, how much I wanted to reach out. "You came," she said finally, not turning to me. Her voice carried something quiet, almost fragile, like a thread ready to snap. I stammered, glancing down at my own hands. "Thought maybe talk." She laughed softly, a small, breathy thing that didn't reach her eyes. "About what?" I shrugged. Words felt too clumsy. I settled beside her, keeping space, but close enough that our knees almost touched. Almost. That word alone carried a weight I could feel in my chest. "I saw you today, with someone," I said finally, voice low. I wasn't sure if it was jealousy, concern, or some mix that made my stomach tighten. She stiffened, fingers curling into her lap. "It wasn't," she began, then stopped. "Look down." The corner of her mouth twitched. "It's nothing. Just work people. That's all." I wanted to push. I wanted to ask what nothing meant, but I didn't. Instead, I watched the way her fingers trembled slightly, how she stared at a lamppost instead of me. I started again, then faltered. "I don't know why I care." She finally looked at me, eyes wide, hesitant, something raw glinting in them. "Because it's weird. You and me. I mean, you're—" Her voice caught. She swallowed. "You're young." "I shouldn't, I know," I said. My throat felt tight. I don't care. I mean, I do, but we stopped. Words tangled between us, unnecessary. The only sound was the rustle of leaves, the occasional car far down the street. My hand twitched, wanted to brush against hers, but I kept it still. She noticed anyway. I felt her glance flick toward it. "I shouldn't feel this way," she said softly. "But I do. I want things I can't have. Things I shouldn't want." Her words hung there, fragile as glass. I wanted to say I felt the same, wanted everything, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned slightly closer, careful. Not close enough to close the distance completely, but close enough that we both felt it. A pause. A breath. She looked away, and I saw the vulnerability she was trying to hide, so delicate it almost broke me. I wanted to ask her the one thing that could change everything. The one thing I wasn't sure I had the courage to hear. Instead, I whispered, barely audible. Her eyes met mine, wide and uncertain. And the question, unspoken, half-formed, hung in the air between us, waiting. I noticed it first on a Thursday. She didn't answer my text right away. Not unusual, except it was unusual. The pause stretched into hours, then a day. I tried again. Nothing. I showed up at the cafe where we usually met, hands shoved deep in my hoodie pockets, heart already bracing. She wasn't there. Not even her bag on the chair. Not even her usual quiet corner occupied. The barista shrugged. She hasn't come by all week. I walked past the bookstore, past the park bench, past the streets where we talked late, watched streetlights pool over wet asphalt. No sign of her. When I finally reached her door, I hesitated longer than usual. My hand hovered over the knob. I wanted to knock, wanted to call, wanted to leave a note tucked somewhere she'd see. But I didn't. My thumb traced the edge of the wood instead, then fell. The text I had drafted in my head, careful, casual, nothing too revealing, remained unsent. My phone sat in my pocket like a silent witness. I started imagining scenarios, all wrong. Maybe she met someone. Maybe it was work, or her child, or something I wasn't supposed to know. Maybe she realized everything about us was wrong. Maybe she was protecting herself. Protecting me. Protecting what exactly? The apartment felt smaller, quieter. I replayed our last conversation, the pause, her eyes, the question I hadn't finished. That half-formed confession, did it scare her? Or did it scare me more? I thought about all the ways I could explain my absence, all the ways I could fill the space she'd left. Nothing felt right. The air smelled faintly of rain, like it always did in the evenings, but now it felt colder. Empty. I passed the cafe again. Empty table. The steam from my coffee curled, unnoticed. My hand reached out, almost, then stayed folded around the cup. I'll habit, I'll pause, I'll kvejutik. I imagined her doing the same, sitting somewhere, waiting, wondering if I'd come. Did she think I wouldn't? Did she think I should? Did she feel the same invisible tug I felt, like strings pulled tight, ready to snap? I didn't call. I didn't knock. I didn't text. I just walked past her door one more time and left the world as it was, silent, still unresolved. That night, I stared at my phone, at the unsent messages. Words I wanted to write, confessions I wanted to make, questions I wanted answered. All paused, all hovering. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And somewhere, maybe a block away, maybe across town, she did the same. The same hesitant hand over a phone. The same thought stopped mid-breath. And for a moment, the world waited with us. I found her in the kitchen, early evening, the light low and warm through the half-open blinds. She was leaning against the counter, a mug in her hands, fingers wrapped around it like it could anchor her. I hesitated in the doorway, watching the way her shoulders slumped just slightly, the way her eyes kept flicking toward the window. "Hey," I said softly, not loud, just present. She looked up, startled for a fraction of a second, then relaxed into something fragile, like she'd been holding her breath without knowing it. "Hey," she said. I shifted closer, unsure. Unsure if I was allowed, unsure if she'd push me away. I wasn't sure if I should come. Her lips twitched into a faint, almost nervous smile. "I wasn't sure if you would." We fell into a quiet rhythm, standing there, mugs warming our hands, not needing words. The tension had been there for weeks, months, in silences, in pauses, in half-written texts. And now, it was raw, present, alive in the space between us. I started and stopped. My chest felt tight. My tongue caught on words that had been circling my mind, rehearsed, discarded, rewritten a dozen times. She glanced at me, head tilted, eyes searching. "Go on," she said softly. Not a push, not a demand, just safe. I exhaled slowly. "I wanted to see you, even when I shouldn't have, even when I knew it was complicated." My voice caught and I swallowed. "I like being with you." Her fingers tightened around the mug. A small tremor ran through her hand. I know," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I feel it too. I just didn't know if it was right, or fair, or possible." We didn't move closer immediately. The room hummed with ordinary life. A fridge humming, the streetlights turning on outside, the faint smell of coffee lingering. It was mundane, and in its mundanity, it was everything. I reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. She let her eyes linger on mine, and something unspoken passed between us. Acknowledgement, permission, something like surrender without surrendering completely. "I don't know what happens next," I said softly. She exhaled a quiet sound and set her mug down. Then, slowly, she touched my hand with hers. Light, gentle, enough to make my chest ache. "Okay," she said soft. Not romantic, not declarative. Just okay. And that was enough. Enough for now. Enough to stand there, together, aware of the stakes, aware of the risk, aware of everything we'd been holding back. Enough to let the tension ease, just slightly, without needing a grand confession or a dramatic gesture. We just stayed there, hands touching, breathing quiet, letting the moment settle. The rest could wait. It was 8:47 a.m. when I found myself sitting on the park bench again, the same one we'd claimed months ago, though it felt smaller now, quieter, somehow warmer. The air smelled faintly of rain from the night before, leaves damp and glossy in the sunlight. She arrived a few minutes later, black coffee in hand, the mug slightly chipped at the rim. She didn't smile at first, just nodded, a familiar, steadying gesture, and set her coffee beside mine. The ritual, the one thing that had carried us through uncertainty, pauses, and nights of unsent texts. We sat in silence, letting it settle around us. Not empty, not tense. Just lived in. Comfortable, in the way routines become comforting when they carry memory. "You got my favorite," I said, nodding at the mug. She shrugged, almost casual. You've reminded me enough times. Her fingers brushed mine as she adjusted the cup. Small contact. Enough. We talked about ordinary things. The hum of the city, a neighbor's dog barking, a book I had finished too quickly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that needed to be. Yet everything mattered because it was ours. Months had passed since the bench had been witness to our near confessions, our half-finished sentences, the tension we'd let hang like mist. And yet, here we were, fully present without fanfare, fully present without declarations. At one point, I reached for the napkin she always folded with that meticulous tension, and she noticed just slightly a twitch at the corner of her mouth, a quiet acknowledgement of memory. You remember too much, she said lightly, though her eyes softened. I notice everything, I replied. Not a boast, not a confession, just fact. We sat for a while, the morning stretching gently, sunlight catching the steam of our coffee. I felt her hand rest against mine, a grounding touch, and I realized it didn't have to be a rush, a declaration, or a climax. Life itself, in its quiet, uneven way, was enough. We left the bench eventually, walking side by side without speaking, hands brushing occasionally, the city humming around us. Ordinary steps, ordinary streets. Yet, somehow it felt like home. Back at her apartment, she poured another cup of black coffee for me. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The ritual spoke louder than words. Later, as I stepped out, I paused at the door. She was at the counter, hands around her own mug, looking out the window. I caught her gaze for a second. That single glance carried months of quiet confessions, hesitations, and small victories. I smiled just slightly. She returned it just slightly. And that was enough. Walking away, I thought about the bench, the mornings, the unsent texts, the half-finished words. About how it hadn't been perfect, how it hadn't been simple, but it had been ours. And sometimes, that's all that matters. I didn't need to say it aloud. She knew. I knew. That soft understanding, more than a word, more than a gesture, was everything. And maybe, someday, we'd sit there again at 8:47 a.m., coffee warming our hands, the city moving around us quietly.